Welcome aboard, applicants. Let's begin with question 1 from the first year law students exam, June 2017. As with all questions, we begin with the call of the question, so let's begin there. Number 1, can Mary prevail on her lawsuit? Discuss. 2, if so, what damages, if any, is Mary entitled to recover and from whom? Discuss. 3, what defenses, if any, may Dan and Ed reasonably assert, and will they be successful? Discuss. Okay. We really don't know here what this lawsuit pertains to. We know it's a lawsuit not dealing with crime, so we know it's a civil suit. And as being a civil suit, is it in contracts or is it in torts? Let's peek up into this paragraph right here. The very last sentence gives it away. Breach of what? Contract. Okay, right there. So we know we're dealing with contract law and not tort law. Okay. With that being said, we want to make sure to start approaching our call of the question here. Can Mary prevail on her lawsuit? Question mark. Now the next thing we want to address is the second call, which would be, we want to make sure to number these when they give you numbers, when the readers give you numbers, I should say. And then 2, if so, what damages is Mary entitled to recover? Oh, let's see here. Excuse me. Recover and from whom? Question mark. Then number 3, what defenses, if any, what defenses may Dan and Ed reasonably assert? Okay. We want to make sure too that when we start this out, we want to make sure to say who is suing who, and we want to find out. And this paragraph or this last sentence of the last paragraph gives it away. On December 2nd, 2016, Mary sued Dan and Ed for breach of contract. Okay, so we know now our party versus party is Mary v. Ed, Dan. Okay. Okay. Or excuse me, Dan and Ed. I'm gonna make sure to get that in the right order. Okay. Now let's begin with our first read. Mary, a football fan, owns an old-looking football seemingly autographed by Bart Starr, the winning quarterback in the first Super Bowl in 1967. That she bought for $100 at a flea market. Mary and her friend Dan both assumed that it was a genuine autograph, game ball used in that 1967 Super Bowl. Dan offered Mary $10,000 for the ball. In response, Mary wrote in pen on a napkin, Dan agrees to buy Mary's Bart Starr football for $10,000 on or before December 1st, 2016. Dan signed the napkin in pen, and Mary kept the napkin without signing it. As December approached, Dan was unable to come up with $10,000. Dan's friend Ed, who also assumed the ball was a genuine autographed 1967 Super Bowl game ball, wanted the ball, so Dan typed a document which read, Dan hereby assigns all his rights to buy Mary's football to Ed. Ed hereby assumes all of Dan's obligations under Dan's contract with Mary to buy her football. Dan and Ed both signed 3 copies, each keeping 1 copy and sending a copy to Mary. After some internet research, Ed discovered that while the Bart Starr autograph on the football was genuine, the football was not the type used in the 1967 game. It was instead a consumer product manufactured after 2005. The ball is worth about $1,000. Dan and Ed no longer want the ball. On December 2nd, 2016, Mary sued Dan and Ed for breach of contract. Okay, so now that we know what area law we're dealing with, contract law, we want to make sure to throw in our shopping list here: contract formation, third-party rights, covenants, conditions, and excuses, discharge of the duty to perform, breach of contract, and remedies. Okay, now coming back up in issue spotting. Mary, a football fan, owns an old-looking football seemingly autographed by Bart Starr, now the winning quarterback, and then in the first Super Bowl series in 1967 that she bought for $100 at a flea market. Okay, this gives an idea of what we're dealing with in terms of an item that's being sold. Mary and her friend Dan both assumed it was a genuine autographed game ball used in the 1967 Super Bowl. Here it is. Dan offered Mary $10,000 for the ball. Okay, so now we know that the object that is of the contract here is a good. It's not services, it's not the sale of land, it's a good. So what we're going to look at applicable law right now. What law is applicable because we're dealing with goods? The Uniform Commercial Code. Okay, and make sure that you define goods, and remember, goods are tangible, movable property, readily identifiable at the time of contract formation. And the good we're talking about here is the football. Okay, now down here under merchants, Mary, a football fan, would just being a football fan make Mary a merchant? Well, no, not without more, and we don't see anything else. Also, the added aspect too is that she didn't know a lot about the football, and maybe its history, and maybe as a merchant she would have known a little bit more about the football. So I would say Mary is not a merchant. That was one who regularly deals in the goods of the kind, or holds himself out as having special skill or knowledge related to said goods. So I would say Mary equals non-merchant. Okay. Now, what about Dan and Ed? Well, as we scan through here, now Dan offered Mary, $10,000 for the ball. We kind of scanned through here. Dan signed the napkin. Mary kept the napkin. Dan was unable to come up with the $10,000. Now, all the way through here, we're not finding anywhere here that Dan or Ed regularly dealt in like autographed footballs or had knowledge of like antiques of this kind. And also the fact of the matter is they had to do some internet research in order to discover that the Bart Starr was in fact maybe not a genuine autographed football, but the type used in but instead a consumer product manufactured after 2005. So that fact there would definitely lend itself to both Ed and Dan being non-merchants. Non-merchants. Okay, so we're dealing with two non-merchants here. Okay, now with that being said, let's go into contract formation. Now remember, in a contract, a validly enforceable contract contains legally enforceable offer, acceptance, consideration without applicable defenses to contract formation. Right here we have our offer. Offer is what? Dan offered Mary $10,000 for the football. So we're looking down here. Let's throw in our offer. Present manifestation of intent to be bound, communicated to identified offeree, empowering that offeree to accept the offer. What are our terms? Quantity, time, interested party, price, and subject matter. Quantity, we got one autograph. Well, I see one autographed football. Now, time for performance. This is actually in the contract details as well. In response, Mary wrote in pen on a napkin, Dan agrees to buy Mary's Bart Starr football. So it's Bart Starr football. I gotta put that down there. Make sure there's two stars in there. Sorry, two R's in the star. Yep, that's right. Bart Starr football. Now, when is he to perform? Time for performance. On or before December 1st, 2016. Okay. December, let's see, 1st, 2016. Okay. Now, interested party, this would be Mary, and initially I believe this is Dan. So yeah, exactly. Mary and Dan. Okay. Price. Oh, we know that one. $10,000. Subject matter. Autographed. Bart. Star. Football. Okay. So does it look like we have all the necessary terms being certain and definite? Quantity, time, interested parties, price, subject matter. Sure looks like it. Do we have a valid offer? Absolutely. So let's see if we have a valid acceptance. Now, here under the following facts here now, Mary wrote in pen on a napkin, Dan agrees to buy Mary's Bart Star football for $10,000 on or before December 1st, 2016. We just talked about that. Dan signed the napkin in pen, and Mary kept the napkin without signing it. So, looks to me like we have mutual assent here. Both parties acting in conformity as there being an agreement. So, and remember, offer acceptance is the definition of mutual assent. So, we're looking at unequivocal assent to the terms of the offer and the means or modes invited by the offer, which is exactly what happened here. Now, so we have an acceptance. Now, do we have consideration? Don't forget about consideration here. Is this bargain for exchange legal detriment flowing between the offerer and the offeree? Absolutely. $10,000 being exchanged for what? The Bart Star football. The Bart Star football being exchanged for the $10,000 sounds like sufficient consideration for me. Okay. Now, are there any possible defenses here? Well, let's throw in our classic one. The classic is statute of frauds. Okay, now the statute of frauds. What kind of statute of frauds are we dealing with here? Obviously, not the 1-year rule or the sale of an interest in land. Most likely, it's going to be the sale of goods $500 or more, because we're dealing with a good here, the Bart Star football. Okay, now, was there a writing? Well, we have the napkin in pen, okay, and we have Dan signing the napkin in pen, and Mary keeping the napkin without signing it. However, do we have Ed having a signature on that napkin? We really don't. So we may not have all the parties to be charged having signatures on that, because remember, it has to be in writing, contain all necessary certain terms, and have the signature of the party to be charged. Parties to be charged here would be Dan and Ed. Okay, so we may have the writing and it may contain all the necessary terms, not enough signatures, so we need an exception. So let's take a look here at our exception. We have the merchants, or we have the confirmatory memorandum, we could say. Which, in a confirmatory memorandum, remember the aspect about it is that it contains all necessary and certain terms, but it also is in writing, and and it's also in writing. And also, remember though, we're not dealing with a merchant. Let's say, for instance, though, Mary might have been a merchant. It's possible. Oh, not merchants. That's exactly right. That's why we need an exception to the statute of frauds here. There really is. If we're only dealing with the Ed situation, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. That the parties are not merchants. So we need to establish one of the exceptions to the sale of goods $500 more. Goods accepted and paid for. We don't see that happening. Well, we don't see the starting the performance of a custom-made good. Do we have any other particular exception that you can see besides confirming memorandum? So that's what I'm saying here. When Mary made this in response right here, that I'm thinking could have been a confirmatory memorandum. But remember, the rule on it is it has to be made by a merchant, okay, or signed by the merchant. We don't have a merchant here. We just see that Mary is a football fan, so we don't have anything like that. But arguably, with this writing, would the napkin itself support the writing? It looks like it could. Now, here's the thing, though. This is a creative argument. I would not, and this is where I would say we probably would need an exception. I had to think about this for just a minute here to let all the facts be absorbed. I think the combined effect of the napkin, the combined effect of the document of the napkin, and Ed signing the contract to Dan, where Dan and Ed both signed 3 copies, that would give you enough of the that would provide you the signature. So that if you integrated those documents within the statute of fraud to satisfy the statute of frauds, I believe that would be the creative argument that would overcome the signature requirement. Okay, or should that not to overcome the signature requirement, the missing signature initially of Ed, that would be overcome here because we have both Dan and Ed both signing 3 copies. Okay. So yeah, I would say we want to make sure here that we both documents, okay, combined. Let's see here. Okay, satisfy the statute of frauds. Okay, after 4. Yeah, well, but remember though, it's the combined effect though, because look at here. That's why I'm saying you could bring in that this actually, you're right, it's after the formation, but remember it's the combined, it's the combination of all of the writings that represents the statute of frauds requirement for assign. Yes, okay, that's exactly right. Very, very good. That's exactly what it is. Now remember though, in here we find that they were mistaken as to what actually was the case. It wasn't in fact a genuine autographed 1967 football. Was what was in fact what? It was in fact a, let me say it how they say it here. It was instead a consumer product manufactured after 2005. What's that for a possible defense here? Well, as you remember, this fact can still be used as a defense for against enforceability by, remember we talked about here, what defenses, if any, may Dan and Ed reasonably assert, and will they be successful? Discuss. So that's what I'm saying here, that we have defenses here that they could possibly bring up later on, Dan and Ed. That would be what? The mistake. Yeah, exactly. Unilateral mistake. But I would actually say mistake being mutual mistake. Exactly. Because both of the parties were mistaken. How do we know that both parties were mistaken? Well, it's after some research, after some internet research here, that Ed discovered that the Bart Star was in fact the consumer product manufactured after 2005, not the 1967 autographed ball. So now we're going to look at that as well in terms of mutual mistake for a possible defense. Rescission. So your rescission. I don't think so. That would be undoing the contract. I think what you would probably do is reform the contract, but if anything, would be reformation rather than rescission. Yeah. See, that's why I'm saying this might be a way to provide them a defense. But I think if they really want the football, they could just reform the price to $1,000 and then go through with the agreement. Okay. But remember here. That we're trying to make as many arguments as we can within our given time of 60 minutes here. So, or I should say within our 15-minute beginning time, or 20 minutes, and that's exactly right. So that we'll make an argument here, mutual mistake, that they could possibly see this as a defense for both Dan and Ed. Now, with that being said, what do we have now when we get to the second paragraph here? Now, as December approached, Dan was unable to come up with the $10,000. So we'll hang on to that one. Dan's friend Ed, who also assumed the ball was a genuine autographed 1967 Super Bowl game ball, wanted the ball. So Dan typed a document which read, "Dan hereby assigns all of his rights to buy Mary's football to Ed. Ed hereby assumes all of Dan's obligations under Dan's contract with Mary to buy her football." So what is that? Exactly. Very good. I would have to say that we're dealing with third-party rights here. And what kind of third-party rights are we dealing with here? Assignment delegation. What's the assignment of contract? Which, remember, an assignment of contract, we got an assignment of rights. Remember what the rights would be here. It's the right to receive the football, the right to buy the football. Remember and then under delegation of duties. Yep, exactly right. And that would be the delegation, the performance, or I should say the delegated performance of buying the football. Excellent. And is this the area here too? Is this a delegable duty? In other words, is it one of those non-delegable duty type situations? Well, it looks to me like it is a delegatable duty. It's not non-delegable. It is delegable. Yeah, exactly. Got to keep that in mind, though. Okay, now after that, after we've ruled out third-party rights, do we have any conditions to look at? Well, yeah, I would say we have a condition, a constructive condition, which would be what? That constructive condition of implied obligation of good faith and fair dealing. Small argument, implied obligation of good faith, that parties will perform under the contract as they promised. Okay. And then down here, was there any excuse of those conditions? Well, up here, now Dan was unable to come up with the $10,000. However, is that the only argument that we could bring up anticipatory repudiation? I think we could combine that with another thing. Now remember, Dan, it's not that Dan was able to come up with $10,000 as anticipatory repudiation, because that's what prompted him to have his friend Ed assume the contract. So we want to bring that in when we bring up assignment, or excuse me, the assignment of the contract. Okay. Now, after some internet research, here we go. Ed discovered that while the Bart star autographed on the football was genuine, the football was not the type used in the 1967 game. It was instead a consumer product manufactured after the ball is worth about $1,000. Dan and Ed no longer want the ball. See right here. It's this fact here that we're dealing with the anticipatory repudiation. So it's no longer wanting the ball right here. Okay. They no longer want the football. Now that we've had anticipatory repudiation, what is our breach of contract measurement? Well, it's going to have to be what? Absolutely, perfect tenor rule. Remember though, right, that's right. Right, some of the arguments that you can bring up even before contract performance, very good argument there that we have IIF as their possible arguments here. Before we get to anticipatory repudiation, I would have to say exactly correct on pointing that out. Excellent. Impossibility, impracticability, and I would say financial impracticability here rather than commercial. How do we know financial rather than commercial? It's because of the inability to, or maybe Dan was unable to come up with the $10,000, but it's not really certain as to whether Dan or Ed could come up with the 1,000. So I'm just saying financial impracticability and then frustration of purpose. Primarily, this is going to be frustration of purpose. That they're going to say, now, was it impossible for either party to perform? In other words, was it impossible for Dan and Ed to come up with $10,000 or $1,000? It's objectively possible, possibly for them to do that. We don't know enough facts, assuming that is financial impracticability. In other words, has there been such a market flux? What are market flux or change circumstance? Well, look, the change circumstance here is now the ball is worth $1,000. It might not be financially practicable for them to go through with this agreement because they technically would be, if we stick with the $10,000 contract price, right? Exactly, they would be out $9,000. And to come back, and I wanted to clarify something on impossibility. Impossibility, is it objectively impossible for both of them to come up with $10,000? No, I wouldn't say that. Assuming that we know a little bit more facts, but we don't know enough about the impossibility argument. So we would need more facts. Financial impracticability, though, is it financially practicable for them to go through this contract, even though the ball's worth 1,000, contract price said it's 10,000. They could argue financial impracticability here, but the main argument that they're gonna make is frustration of purpose. They were intending to buy Dan and then Ed were intending to buy a Bart Starr autographed 1967 football, not one of these, not the 2005. How did it put it here? Consumer product manufacturer of 2005. So in other words, for the very basis of the contract has been frustrated, and but the argument could still be made by Mary that it's still a football and it's still like a production football of pro, it's still considered a football, but not the type used in 1967. So I think that's a weak argument, but it still is an argument that Mary could make, and that for arguing the frustration of purpose has not occurred. But I think Dan and Ed have a strong argument that they originally thought and their intent when they entered in the agreement. Dan entered agreement, and then Ed was assigned the contract, that they were buying an autographed 1967 Bart Starr football. Okay, so with that being said, I think the strongest the two here would be financial impracticability and frustration of purpose for arguments that Dan and Ed could bring. And then we also have, we talked about anticipatory repudiation. And so sometimes when you're writing too, this may happen where you have to come back in and fill in. Absolutely do that. That's why you can do a lot of editing on the fly, so that in case you might have thought of an argument that you want to put into your outline, be sure to put it in. Okay, excellent. So now in the breach of contract perfect tender rule, now talking about that, neither party perfectly tendered. Okay, so we have breach a breach possibility flowing from that Mary could claim against Ed and Dan because they no longer want the football. And Dan and Ed could say, well, hey, Mary, you're not able to come to us with a 1967, Bart Starr autographed football. So it's possible that the breach could actually have flown or could flow in both directions here. But mainly our argument is limited to Mary versus Dan and Ed. Okay. Now, with that being said, did Dan and Ed perfectly tender? No. Now, with that being said, let's talk about remedies now. First of all, we have the duty to mitigate the damages. Okay, now that would be if they would have to go out and find a reasonably equivalent 2005 football, which possibly the worth we found out is about $1,000. So they'd have to mitigate their damages by finding a reasonably equivalent one, and in doing that, they would have observed their duty to mitigate their damages. Okay, now with that being said, what really is their expectation damage here? Their expectation damage, the expectation damages was the benefit of their bargain. Right. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for pointing that out to me. I got the parties messed up there. What is Mary's expectation damages here? Thank you very much for pointing that out. That we have Mary's expected profit, the benefit of the bargain. Which would be what here? The benefit of the bargain would be recovering the $10,000 contract price. But remember, if which would be the contract price of $10,000. Okay. Now, was there any consequential damages here? This would be the Hadley versus Baxendale type damages. So we got Hadley versus Baxendale. It doesn't look like anything was foreseeable at time of contract formation that might consequently result on to cause a damage to either party if one party breached the contract. So I don't see that as a likely remedy. Right, reliance damages. See, that's what I'm saying. Make sure to throw in incidental damages. Okay, but Where do you see reliance damages? Okay, yeah, that's exactly right. No reliance damages. Now we want to make sure to throw in specific performance, okay? Because why? We were originally dealing with no reliance damages. Yeah, we're dealing with the a possibly autographed Bart Star football. But the argument could be made is the 2005 the consumer product manufacturer after 2005 that it actually was a unique good, and I would say no. So this is unlikely to succeed. Unlikely because why is it unlikely? Not unique good. Okay. Now let's make sure we put in our calls here. So what damages is Mary entitled to recover? We want to put this into its correct spot. Copy that. Put that up here. Excellent. What defenses may Dan and Ed reasonably assert? Want to make sure to put that in. Cut. Right. She could get. Okay, you're gonna say she could get the $1,000. In what now? In what context? See here. Make sure I get this put in the right spot here. Right here. Paste. Okay, got make sure to bring in breach of contract, perfect tender down here. Okay. Put statute of frauds mistake right here. Sometimes you have to reorganize this to fit the order that we're responsible to answer the call to question. Oh. Okay. Perfect. Excellent. Of Bart Star, because it was not the game ball, she may get $1,000. Right. See, that's where I think you could argue in here under possibly right after expectation damages. You might argue reformation, maybe that to reform the price to the $1,000 price. From 10,000. Let's see. Oh, make sure I get this to the $1,000 price. I think you could argue that. Yeah. And now, yeah. Okay. Yep. I think that's correct. Now let's quickly go over this really quickly here to make sure we've tackled everything. Okay. We're dealing with Mary versus Dan, applicable law, Uniform Commercial Code, merchants, Mary's non-merchant, Dan and Ed are non-merchants, contract information to offer, Q-tips, acceptance, consideration, assignment of contract. We got assignment of rights, the right to buy the football, delegation to delegated performance of buying the football, the constructive implied obligation of good faith and applied obligation of good faith, and then what defenses may Dan and Ed reasonably assert? Statute of frauds, mistaken, possibility of financial and practicability, frustration of purpose. Perfect. That was what I was looking for. Take that out, and then come down here. What damages is Mary entitled to recover? Okay, make sure that goes in there. Anticipate repudiation, breach, remedies, duty mitigate, expectation. Argue maybe reformation. I'll come up here and put that under mutual assent, possibly. Reformation argument. Oh, I'm sorry, not mutual assent. Excuse me. Under mistake, mutual mistake here. Excellent. Okay, now let's see here. I think that's it. Now you were saying that she could get the $1,000. Are you seeing that through reformation or reliance? Reformation. Yeah, I agree too. I agree. That's exactly right. And so yeah, I would say that that's definitely a good argument. Now, excuse me, the expectation damages. That's that $10,000 contract price that she might be expecting, but I think most often or most likely it's going to be a reformation remedy that from 10,000 to the $1,000 price to actually reform that benefit of the bargain down to the correct price of a reasonably equivalent football. Right here, the ball is actually worth about $1,000. So yeah, okay, excellent, excellent, looks great, and we were able to not only spot all the issues, put the issues in the appropriate call the questions, make all the arguments, and be able to put in all those facts in their appropriate order, and as you know, things happen during organization outlining. If they do, just reset in your mind, and get back on it, get back on task. Like I confuse the parties. We'll get those parties reorganized in your mind correctly. And then I also too make sure if you have like a situation that happens where you want to put in an additional set of arguments like impossibility, financial impracticability, frustration of purpose. Well, absolutely put those in there, and make sure to just be efficient with your time and with the facts. And you know what? Seems like a doable task. Okay, thank you so much for joining me on this question here. I hope you had a great time. Okay, I want to put a shout out to Chess Cruncher TV. Keep chess crunching, Chess Cruncher. I also want to put a shout out to my Amazon Kindle book, Battling the Big Bad Baby Bar, Essay Basics. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we're going to have some more wonderful questions coming up. Okay, thank you again, and God bless.